Now it's time for Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. And I am joined today with philosopher and theologian Ken Samples. Ken, thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm glad to be with you.
You know, we're going to be talking about the Easter season and, something that comes up pretty often. Some Christians might be surprised by this, some not so much, but it is a common maybe challenge that non-Christians will present to Christians, and that is the pagan origins of Easter. So for those in apologetics conversations, of course, we know and we're prepared to answer those questions, but for those who are unaware, can you help explain the origin of Easter?
Yeah, I think the place to begin, Sandra, is a recognition that the ancient world was what we would call a pagan world. Pagan would mean non-Jewish, and then later would come to mean non-Christian. So in the pagan world, in the ancient world, there were many gods, many beliefs that were practiced. One tradition, and I'm going to call it a spring pagan festival, was connected to the Anglo-Saxons, and it was called Ostra, I think is probably the best way of pronouncing it, very close to Easter, if you will. So pagan people celebrated the festival because it was the end of winter and the beginning of spring, and almost like a death and then a rebirth, if you will. If you think of crops and things of that nature. Well, when Christianity came along in the first century, by the close of the century, Christians began to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. And they even shifted from Saturday, the Sabbath, to Sunday, because Sunday was a commemoration of Jesus's resurrection. Well, when they began celebrating Easter in the springtime, it fell along the same general time as this pagan festival. Now, what I think is interesting, Sandra, is this. Every particular day has a pagan connotation, from Sunday to Saturday. All of those days have a particular connection to ancient peoples and ideas. I think what was very thoughtful and reflective on the part of the early Christians is, instead of changing all the days, they picked particular days that had been practiced by pagan beliefs and changed the focus. Rather than the winter solstice, they focused it on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I think that was wise. And it took time for people to kind of break out of their past beliefs, but that's the way of thinking it. Christians never worshiped pagan gods. Christians affirmed that Jesus was God in human flesh, and after dying, he was raised from the dead.
Well, thank you for that. That's definitely, I think, helpful for Christians to know and be prepared if they are presented with that challenge. So you mentioned when that shift happened, it like the Sabbath changing from Saturday to Sunday, and changing from a pagan recognition of this shift into springtime.
Yeah.
When did that shift happen?
Well, I could say a couple things. One, even in the New Testament, Paul talks about Christians transitioning to meeting on the first day of the week. So there's some indication that it went from Saturday Sabbath to Sunday Lord's Day, even during the apostolic era. Obviously, Easter isn't a particular day. With Christmas, it's always December 25th. Easter fluctuates. It can be late March, it can be late April, and any time in between. It shifted gradually. There are statements even in the Church Fathers, 2nd, 3rd century, that talk about the date of Easter. So I think clearly by the 3rd or 4th century, there was a movement away. And in fact, Sandra, by the 5th century, most of the pagan nations had been converted to Christianity. So it kind of, the issue kind of resolved itself.
So when we think about the pagan origins, even though things have shifted, and so now what we come to understand is Easter it's fairly common practice, or at least acknowledged, even for those who don't recognize Easter. But some might say that because of Easter having pagan origins, Christians shouldn't affiliate themselves with it. Like acknowledging Christ resurrected, yes, but celebrating Easter and the bunnies and the ducks and all of that stuff, that those are all symbols pointing back to its pagan origins, and that we shouldn't then engage in any sort of celebration or embracing of that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think two things. One, you have to be very careful about what we call the genetic fallacy. That's judging things totally in terms of their origin. I mean, the first astronomers were astrologers. Should I reject astronomy because it's connected early on with astrology? No, astronomy's changed and moved away from superstition. I think similarly, we have to recognize that days and months and seasons have connections to one another, but it's not practicing. I would point this out, Sandra. You know, it's kind of easy to kind of poke fun at the pagans or to critique the pagans, but remember, even pagan systems, they were made in the image of God. They were recipients of general revelation, and they received common grace. So they got things right, not just things wrong. Even though the wrong things were pretty wrong-headed, I think we can recognize that if you don't want to have a collection of eggs for your kids in the backyard, if that offends you, I would say don't do it. Don't go against your conscience. But I think for the most part, those practices are really benign.
Thank you so much for that, Ken.
Sure.
And I'm very excited about what you've had to say on this topic, and really what you have to say on a lot of common challenges against Christianity. So if you're watching or listening, go to reasons.org and find out how you can get your copy of Christianity Cross-Examined. Thank you again for joining us, Ken.
Bye-bye.